Special government employee Elon Musk and his DOGE crew sat down with Fox's Bret Baier.
Musk discussed DOGE's ambitions, Tesla vandalism, and more. Let's take a look.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. From a nominal deficit of $2 trillion to try to cut the deficit in half to $1 trillion, or looked at it in total federal spending to drop the federal spending from $7 trillion to $6 trillion. Well, this is a revolution, and I think it might be the biggest revolution in government since the original revolution. But at the end of the day, America is going to be in much better shape. America will be solvent. The critical programs that people depend upon will work, and it's going to be a fantastic future. Well, I think a great wrong is being done to the people of Tesla and to our customers. I mean, Tesla is a peaceful company that has made great cars, great products. That's all it's done. Hasn't harmed anyone, and yet people are committing violence.
The last administration was going to mandate electric vehicles, and now you see on the far left some efforts to go after electric vehicles. It's quite something.
It is ironic. I mean, it seems like the most ironic outcome is the most likely.
Among those who were flanking Musk include Steve Davis, who handles DOGE's daily operations, Joe Gebium, who co-founded Airbnb, and the chief executive of cloud software group, Tom Krause. Krause is in charge of reviewing the Treasury Department's payment systems. Here's what some of them had to say.
We found retirement cases that had so much paper, they had to fit it on a shipping pallet. So the process takes many months, and we're going to make it just many days.
Will it be digitized, or how?
Absolutely. So this will be an online digital process that will take just a few days at most. And I really think, it's an injustice to civil servants who are subjected to these processes that are older than the age of half the people watching your show tonight.
You don't have to be here, right? I mean, you don't have to be doing this.
I have blessed with four beautiful children, my wife and I. But we have a real fiscal crisis, and this is not sustainable. And what's worse, back to my children and everyone else's children, is we are burdening them with that debt, and it's only going to grow.
Many Democrats have criticized DOGE's efforts, arguing that the department is cutting key services. DOGE has also faced legal hurdles. For instance, a federal judge recently blocked DOGE from accessing personal data from the Treasury Department, Education Department, and the Office of Personnel Management. And earlier in March, a judge ruled that DOGE dismantling USAID is likely unconstitutional.
Musk said during the interview that a 15% federal spending reduction could be done without affecting critical services. The tech titan also said he expects to accomplish DOGE's goals within the allowed 130-day window for a special government employee.
So my prediction is that this is going to be the segment today that we disagree most
That's
strongly
right.
on, because, as you know, I'm not a fan of Elon Musk, generally speaking. But I think there's a couple of interesting points here. One is, to my mind, the fact that he did this interview with the DOGE guys is kind of revealing in itself, because we see often in public polling his popularity ratings being lower than those of President Trump. And I was only struck when I was delving deeper into those polls last night. He's particularly unpopular with women. His approval ratings are sort of shored up by men. A recent Quinnipiac poll had him 40 points underwater with women. And then there have been various controversies, the freezing of the Social Security Administration website that happened 4 times in 10 days, the description in a Joe Rogan interview of Social Security as a Ponzi scheme, which I think was considered just a politically bad thing to say, whether he believes it or not. So to my mind, I have other problems with this interview I'll go into in a second, but to my mind, this was an element of damage control on Musk's part.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it was an interesting choice to choose Bret Baier to do the interview as opposed to someone who probably would have been friendlier, like Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, one of the opinion hosts at Fox. Bret Baier obviously leans to the right, but is, I think, a pretty fair journalist. And so they were trying not to give the perception that they were just going to go out and do this softball interview, which is obviously one kind of PR strategy. And Elon Musk has effectively been a meat shield for the Trump administration and for Trump himself, taking a lot of the arrows from the left in terms of what the Trump administration is trying to do. And I would think Trump is very happy about that, to have Elon be the lightning rod for things that are on their face unpopular, but when you dig into them, I obviously support a lot of what DOGE is doing. But just from a political strategy standpoint, I think it's really smart.
Well, I'm always happy to fire a few more arrows in his direction, as you know.
Pull out your quiver.
So, in relation to the interview itself, one of the things that Musk said, one of the things he told Bret Baier, was that critics, characterize his efforts as shooting from the hip, but it's anything but that. And I just don't think that holds up at all. There was the instance where DOGE had to delete the top 5 claims of savings from its so-called wall of receipts. There was the instance related to DOGE's efforts where people working on nuclear safety and on the bird flu were fired and then had to be rehired again. There were other instances where, for example, the claimed savings included a $1.9 billion Treasury contract that had actually been cancelled during the Biden administration. So I think when you look at those things, this idea that Musk and DOGE are doing this very rigorous work in which an occasional error slips through doesn't hold up. And I think that the related problem is some of the cuts that he is proposing really go to things that I think are politically dangerous. I mean, I was looking through that wall of receipts last night, and the first 30, 22 of them have no detail at all because they're subject to legal action because of USAID. But one of them, for example, is cancelling a contract with the HUD department where an outside agency was inspecting buildings for potential harms to health. Another one was a Veterans Administration contract to improve the integration of web services regarding healthcare. Once these things really bite, I think A, they will hurt vulnerable people, and B, because of that, they're a political danger to Musk and to some extent by Trump, whether or not you're right in that Musk being a heat shield.
Yeah, I suppose the devil's in the details for a lot of these programs, and one of the issues that they brought up in this interview was on some of the things that they're cutting, they're replacing it with a cheaper alternative. So one of those was this government survey that cost the government $1 billion, which Elon Musk says would have cost $10,000 if they had just used SurveyMonkey. It's a 10-question survey that apparently takes government employees 10 minutes. So that would be one example of, well, I don't know what was in the survey, but let's say the survey was actually useful to the government. The question then is, should it cost $1 billion? And I think the answer to any survey is probably no. They also talked about a lot of the Social Security fraud that they've been getting into, indicating that one individual was able to use a 9-month-old Social Security number to secure a small business loan. And there was an audit back in 2023 of Social Security that found a lot of what Elon Musk has been talking about with people who were born prior to 1920 still collecting Social Security checks. Other things in the interview that caught my eye were twice as many government credit cards being used as there are government employees, which doesn't seem to make much sense. Why would anyone have more than one government credit card in order to be able to buy things for the government? They talked about a massive federal government bank account that agencies have been spending from without any oversight. 1,400 employees at the IRS who only hand out laptops and phones to agency staffers. They said that they get never-ending fraud calls related to Social Security, and 40% of them end up being thieves themselves. A lot of really interesting, I think, specific details about what exactly they're grabbing. And I would add on that, to your point about what he was saying about measuring twice, cutting once, and trying to do this with a scalpel rather than a machete is when you're undertaking any effort of this magnitude, there's going to be mistakes that are being made, is what Elon Musk said. And he said, we acknowledge that mistakes have been made and will be made, but we always seek to correct them as quickly as possible. And I thought that was a little bit more self-aware than maybe you gave him credit for.
Well, I'm glad you raised many of the issues that you did, because one of my whole issues with this project is that there are a lot of claims made and very little verification ever offered. So in relation to that survey, for example, I looked for that at some length last night and can find no verification of it other than Elon Musk says it. In relation to one claim that he made that you didn't cite there, he said that Senator Susan Collins had said to him that she had basically got $12 billion for the Navy to build more submarines, and no submarines had been delivered. Even Grok, the AI service on Musk's own X, says that is not the case, that there is no congressional measure that matches that description, and that things are being built at times slower than expected, but not the story that he told. But there's one of these, Amber, and of course we don't have time to go into everything, but there's one of those claims that I think is really instructive in terms of what he said, because I want to get the quote right, to be fair to him. He was talking about the idea that he says that the biggest cries of protest come from fraudsters. Whenever people are cutting government services, that it's primarily fraudsters who complain. And he went immediately from that and he said about fraudsters, it's a tell, crazy. Like the $2 billion to Stacey Abrams' NGO that basically didn't exist and suddenly got $2 billion awarded from the federal government. Why, he says. Now, everything about that statement is wrong. That $2 billion was not awarded to a single organization. It was awarded to 5 organizations. Of those 5 organizations, none of them is run by Stacey Abrams. One is an organization for which she served as counsel. And when it gets to, and it did not just exist, it was founded in 2020. Now, when he gets to the point about why, it's quite clear why that 5 organization coalition exists to build or improve housing, particularly low-income housing, to make it more energy efficient, and in so doing to be not only more ecologically beneficial, but to save people's utility bills and things like that. So when he makes claims like that, I think it is very fair to question his credibility, and more to the point, the things that organizations like that do, which is helping the less well-off, are things that Elon Musk will never have to worry about.
Yeah, well, yeah, he obviously won't have to worry about it. I think what's helpful in this project is that a lot of this has to be codified by Congress. So it won't be just Elon Musk saying, we're cutting this program, right? These are things that have been appropriated by Congress. And so when we go through the budget resolution process, the Republicans in the House and the Senate will have to go through all of these claims, identify if they're legitimate, and then decide what is worth cutting and what's not. These are essentially recommendations. So I think it's helpful that this is not just one guy basically being able to slash a bunch of government programs. There are counter checks and balances that are happening here. And on the Stacey Abrams point, there will be an investigation that the Georgia Senate just voted to go through. So we'll determine pretty quickly whether those are factual claims or not.
We will indeed. And next up, Kristi Noem's message. Stay with us.